What was life like for you before you had a smartphone? Before there was email? Before there was internet access? What did you do? What did I do? I talked to people more. And in my conversations, I wouldn't have that bzzz on my waist where I'm like, oh, hang on one second. Oh, okay. I would drive places without trying to figure out how to balance my cell phone so I could see the video or don't judge me. You do it too. You have this, now everything's connected, everything's to the second immediate. Well, Spanning Tree wasn't designed during that time. Spanning Tree was designed during an era where if the network went down for a minute, no biggie. We're talking anyway. We're doing other things. We don't need the network every second of the day. That had to go. When we came up with this split second, you're down for a second and there's major problems, Spanning Tree had to be enhanced. We're going to look at how Spanning Tree's traditional port transition process works, and then we'll look at some of the enhancements. We'll look at something called Port Fast. We'll look at per VLAN Spanning Tree. And then we'll look at the ultimate enhancement, which is the standard today, Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol. When I first got into Cisco, I remember plugging a device into the switch, and the light on the switch would stay amber for a long time. I'm sitting there going, it's amber, it's amber, it's amber. That means something's wrong, I think. And by the time my mind had enough cognizance to say there must be something wrong, it would go green. And I quickly learned, I'm like, man, I can't plug anything in on the switch and actually have it go active for about 30 seconds or so. And that's because every Cisco switch, well, I shouldn't say every, because now the latest and greatest Nexus and who knows what else is going rapid by default, but most Cisco switches out of the box are running 802.1d, the original Spanning Tree, which specifies that we transitioned every single port through these port states. Number one is listening. So we have a switch, right? You go click, you plug in your laptop or your computer or whatever. First thing it's doing is spending 15 seconds of time listening for BPDUs. It's trying to figure out, are you a switch or are you a router or a PC, or are you something that can harm my network, can cause a loop, or are you something that's a little bit safer? And so during this time, it's sending BPDUs, listening to see if it hears them back, seeing if it hears any BPDUs. So it says, okay, well, I think you're safe. Let's now go into a learning state. Learning state says we're going to have another 15 seconds where I'm trying to figure out what MAC address is on this port. The switch is assuming if you're a real device, you're probably going to be sending a DHCP request or sending some kind of traffic that's going to identify what you are, so I can populate my MAC address table on that port. So when I do actually make you active and make you a forwarding port, then I'll know exactly who you are and what your MAC address is. So I'll populate my CAM table, my content accessible memory, my MAC address table, so I know you. So after 30 seconds of time, the port is now forwarding traffic. Everybody's happy. We can surf the net. We can do whatever we need to do. Now, there is also a blocking state. We'll call this a bonus timer, a bonus penalty. That if a switch port is in a blocking state, the switch could wait up to 20 seconds, which is known as the max age, before moving a block port into a listening phase. What's that mean? Well, it means, let's say we've got, that switch topology that looks like this. We've been playing with it. Those three switches. Root bridge is up here. This guy is the designated port, root port, designated port, and this guy is blocking, right? So let's say this one goes down. Blocking port is, there's essentially, it's always running, it's secular, so you never know exactly what it's going to be at, but there's a timer that runs that says, okay, let's wait, X numbers, maximum of 20 seconds, before I even transition this blocking port right here back into a listening state. So if this goes down, let's say we lose a major link in our network, minimum in the original Spanning Tree, we've got 30 seconds of outage time while we're waiting for this one to go through the listening and learning state. It's as if it was a fresh port when it comes out of there, plus whatever blocking bonus time we have, so up to 20 seconds. So that's 50 seconds. That's nearly a minute of downtime just because we unplugged the cable. So what's that mean? 50-second outage, translated today, it's the loss of every single phone call if you're using voice over IP, loss of streaming connections if you have video conferencing going, loss of database synchronizations, records are out of sync, email. I mean, it's essentially a complete loss of everything, which could be minor depending on the user connection, or it could be very major depending on what's impacted. Is essentially 50 seconds of downtime causes problems in today's world. Solution: rapid spanning tree. More on that. We have to expound on that. So I'll just say for now that's the answer to it. But there is a simpler solution for the PCs. Modern PCs can outboot that little timer. You hit the power button and 15 seconds later, you're sitting at the press Control-Alt-Delete screen to log on. Well, the problem is if you've got a computer that's connected, in a Microsoft domain environment or whatever you are, they're now hitting Control-Alt-Delete, and yet that computer doesn't have an IP address. So they're trying to log in, and it's like, I'm sorry, I can't contact the domain. It doesn't exist for me. I'm not connected to the network. Or, worse yet, this user logs on to some cached temporary profile in an offline mode, can't get to their files. Tech support call, and reboot your computer, and we get the same thing happening. I mean, it can become a major problem. Good thing about this is it's a very simple fix. Portfast. Portfast, in a nutshell, disables spanning tree. So if I go into, look at this mode, I'm in interface configuration mode, and type in spanning tree portfast, now when I click in the device, it's immediately green. It doesn't have those 15 seconds learning, 15 seconds, I should say 15 seconds listening, 15 seconds learning. It just goes immediately green. But, this is probably the biggest message that you get when you type a command on a Cisco device. When you type it in, it says, warning, this should only be enabled on ports connected to a single device. Connecting hubs, concentrators, switches, bridges, etc. to this interface when portfast enabled can cause temporary bridging loops. The switch can recover, and a lot of times we'll see BPDU start cycling around. There's also backup measures like BPDU guard that you can put on there to stop loops in action. But it says use with caution. Be careful with this command. But for just about every end device that you plug in there, that's the norm to have. So portfast is great for the users, but what other enhancements are there? Well, inherent to spanning tree is inefficiency. Meaning, when you elect a root bridge, let's say it's this guy, these guys are going to find their best way to get there, and those are the forwarding links, and this link ends up getting blocked. It's inefficient. Why? Well, that's a link that is sitting there that could be used for something, right? But instead it's completely turned off. It's just sitting there idle until such time that maybe another link goes down, and then it's being used. So until something goes down, that link is just doing nothing. So Cisco looked at it and said, well, we can do better. And they came out with per VLAN spanning tree. Matter of fact, out of the box, this is all Cisco devices run, is the per VLAN spanning tree. And what it does is instead of just having one spanning tree process running on the switch, it actually creates a spanning tree process for every single VLAN that you have. Let me give you an example. Let's say we've got some computers here that are in VLAN 10. So we got 10. And let's throw him in there too, 10. We've got some other computers here that are in VLAN 20. VLAN 20, VLAN 20. What Cisco allows you to do is elect different root bridges per VLAN. So what I could do, instead of just saying, okay, well, this is my one root bridge, I can say, I've got the root bridge for VLAN 20 right here, and over here I have the root bridge for VLAN 10. So all VLAN 10 traffic will calculate and say, okay, well, if this is our root bridge, then this link is my root port, and this link is my root port. Again, this is just for VLAN 10, and this link ends up being blocked for VLAN 10. VLAN 20 looks at it and says, okay, well, this is our root bridge right here, so this is our root port from this switch, this is our root port for this switch, and this link is blocked for us. Yeah? Pretty cool, because in essence, the VLAN 20 traffic get to use this link and this link, whereas the VLAN 10 traffic use this link and this link. So you're getting some distributed usage of all of your connections rather than just one. Now that takes some planning, big time, to try and load balance that correctly when you get to a big switch environment, but it can be done. And people definitely do this all the time to get the maximum utilization they can out of their idle connections. Despite those enhancements, the people have spoken. It's not enough to make it fast for our end users with portfast. It's not enough to have separate VLANs with different root bridges so we can optimize some of our traffic on those idle links. We want more. And the biggest thing is this guy with the purple sign, 50 seconds. 50 seconds to recover from an outage is no longer acceptable. And what I mean by that is if you have these switches, this guy is the root bridge and this one is blocked, and for whatever reason we lose another link, it's going to take 30 to 50 seconds to get that port active. That is not acceptable. Those outage times have ended. So, rapid spanning tree. 802.1w around 2004 really started showing up in some of our switch lines, and this replaces, or I should say enhances, the original 802.1d spanning tree standard. Really the same thing. I mean, when you compare rapid spanning tree to normal spanning tree, it's like, okay, you have a root bridge, goes through election, it's the bridge ID. I mean, same exact concepts. The biggest thing that you'll be able to see with this is proactivity. With normal spanning tree, it's like, oh, link went down. Well, let's go ahead and transition this. Let's do our listening 15 seconds, learning 15 seconds. Well, okay, and also that blocking penalty of up to 20 seconds. I mean, those kind of time frames just don't work. So, with rapid spanning tree, we have new port types. We've got our same old root port and designated port like it always was, but instead of just saying and a blocked port, we now have things like alternate ports and backup ports, things that signify the real difference between rapid spanning tree and spanning tree. So this difference isn't something that can be explained. You must experience it for yourself. Come on, what movie is that from? The Matrix. So let's say we've got a bunch of switches. We've got this kind of, let's say we've got switch 1, switch 2, switch 3, switch 4, and switch 5. Now looking at this topology right here, is there any loops? No. So, but still, they would elect a root bridge. Spanning tree still runs. This guy's the root, so we've got a designated port. This becomes a root port. This guy picks a root port. So they're all going to find the best way to that root bridge anyway, even though there are no loops. Now, if you want to know how to cause an outage really quick in normal spanning tree, here's how. Go in and be like, you know what? This is great, but we need some redundancy. Click, network outage. Why? Well, because this guy now goes, hey, redundant link, let me send my normal BPDU sonar, boom, that goes down this line. Now, as this BPDU goes down, switch 4 is like, sweet, that's the root bridge. It's a cost of 4. It used to cost me 12. It used to cost me 12 to get there. Now, man, this is hands down. This is awesome. You know what? I'm done with this. This is my new root port. I'm going that way. That's better. And so this BPDU, again, in a matter of less than a second, has gone through every single switch. This guy's like, oh man, that's great. I'm going to use this as my root port. And this guy's like, oh, this is my root port. And they go in there. Now that BPDU comes around here. And this guy is where it all stops. He goes, okay, I just saw a BPDU. Wow, that's interesting. That's another path to the root bridge. But there's a problem. I like this path better. I've been using this path for a long while. It cost me 4, and I see this path now, but that cost me 12 to go this way. So even though I see that, I don't like it. So what ends up happening is these guys do a little negotiation wizard. This guy, because he has the better cost, he blocks his link because he's like, oh, this is a loop. And this guy says, okay, this is a designated port. But in the end, this link is blocked. Now you're going, well, why did this cause an outage? Because the entire explanation of what I just told you takes less than a second to happen. These guys immediately are like, oh, that's better. We're all going this way. Yay, let's go this way. But remember the timers for spanning tree? 15 seconds of listening, 15 seconds of learning, and then we're forwarding. So click, you snap in the cable, everybody's like, great, new way to go, but we've got 30 seconds before those links go active. Meanwhile, this guy blocks his link, so the path that used to be working is now severed, chunk, 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 we're doomed, and so now we have to wait for this transition process and this link to go active before we can start forwarding traffic again. Wow. So just by adding a redundant link, we cause a complete network outage. So let me clear that off and redraw it. So how does rapid spanning tree handle it? Rapid spanning tree, we do the same thing. We take a cable, connect the link. Now, again, this is root bridge. Everything was good. This was my root port, everything was as it was before this cable up. So I go click, I snap in that cable. Immediately, a superior BPDU goes down the link, and this is immediately blocked. Huh? So it's a little different. So instead of switch one just sending it and then, being like, all right, you guys deal with that, figure that one out, good luck to you, and we have that 30-second outage, switch one actually sends the superior BPDU and says, okay, I'm going to immediately block this link. This guy, switch 4, receives it and is like, that is awesome. This is going to be my root port, but wait, let go of your block. So this guy, with no negligible delay, Cisco says you can't even measure the amount of time it takes for the BPDU to go down and this guy to respond and say, transition me. That's the actual packet that's sent. Transition me. So this block is removed. Now, that's dangerous because now we potentially have, a network that could loop, right? Because that block just got removed. So Rapid Spanning Tree says, okay, switch 4, you block your links now, just like this guy did right here. You block your links and forward the BPDU to them. So the BPDU, the now superior, the better looking BPDU, goes down to these guys, and both of these guys are like, wow, that's great, I like it, this is my new root port, transition me. Man, I should write that in a different color. So these transition messages, let me make them in red. Transition me, let me go, release the block please. So shoot, switch 4 again with no negligible delay. Cisco says you can't even measure it. The amount of time it takes to send the BPDU and receive the transition message back. You will never drop a packet because it's instant. However we can define that. So then this guy's like, okay, great. I now have a new root port, and I'm going to follow the same procedure. I'm going to send you the BPDU, the one that I believe is superior, and block the port immediately because I don't want to leave this thing without a block and have a loop that happens. So here's my superior BPDU, and that's where the story ends. Switch 2 receives it and is like, yeah, well, you guys may think that's superior, but I don't think much of it at all, actually. Matter of fact, it's nowhere near as good as the BPU that I've been receiving all along. I think my link is better, so he never sends the transition message. I should put a little X there. So the end of the game is the same. We end up with the same looking topology as normal spanning tree, where this guy ends up blocking its link. It's just all of it is instantaneous, so to speak, if I can use that word. Rather than, chucking the BPDU, it's like a hand grenade, throwing the BPDU out there, everybody's like, and blows up, and we have to wait that 30-second timer for everything to figure itself back out again. This one goes more proactive, says, okay, I'm going to send this, block it, and wait for the transition message, which comes instantaneously all the way down the tree until we reach the point at which the transition message is no longer necessary. Now, this is, 5 switches? But it would continue on. I mean, if this was connected to more switches down there, as he received the BPDU there, he would block all these guys, send it to them. They would say transition. He would release the block. So I can't even talk. Stop. So the way that I think about this, I don't know if this will help you, but I just think about a beaker, like a science beaker, and all these little cardboard slats kind of slid in to this beaker. And I think of a marble falling down. And it kind of hits the first cardboard slat, and then somebody's like, okay, I'm going to yank that out. What's going to happen to the marble? It's going to go thunk. This one, right? Yank it out, thunk. Yank it out, thunk. So the marble just kind of thunk, thunk as you remove those blocks all the way down to the beaker. That's to the bottom of the beaker. That's the same thing that happens here. It's like the BPDU is the marble, right? He's like, here it is, block. And he's like, okay, remove me, thunk. We now have a new link that's active. BPDU, marble comes, well, I guess it's not exactly the analogy, but that's the concept, right? It's kind of like thunk, thunk. It hits these guys and they're like, release me. In that block, it gets removed so that you have traffic now able to flow through that direction. So that's, same idea as spanning tree, same exact concept, same end result as in the links are being blocked in the same way. It's just one is reactive, one is proactive. This may take you some time. I've done my best to explain spanning tree, and I feel like I've done it in a way that made sense for me when I got it. But I remember, and it's almost a disadvantage being here now, 10, 11, 12 years later from when I originally learned spanning tree, because as I explain it, I'm like, see? That makes total sense, right? But then I realize I've had 10 years to sit and soak it in, and there's still times when I look at it at first, I'm like, okay, now What? Now, how did that work? I have to run through it in my mind. So if you're feeling like, man, that was like, I kind of got a piece of it. I mean, seriously, I really encourage you, go back through, not just this nugget, but the previous one. Previous one where I laid out how Spanning Tree figures out the topology, root ports, designated ports. Just watch it again. Then I would really encourage you to draw a picture on a piece of paper. Throw 8 switches on there. Put all kinds of links everywhere, redundant links, up, down, left, and right. And then just say, okay, if that one, pick one. Do something like this. Here, I'll show you. Draw something like this. That's your switches. Chunk, 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 chunk. Right? And then say, okay, if this one becomes the root, or pick any one, how would that happen? How would I figure this if all of these were, 1 gigabit per second links, right? And then, come up with some bridge idea. You've seen what I've been doing, and I'm telling you, I didn't, grab these examples from some book and then work through the answers. These are just things I've just made up and let's figure it out. And so you can start labeling, okay, this is the root port. It's one of the things that you will only get by learning and using. So be prepared. When you are looking for the real world or certification exam, to start seeing questions that are drag and drop, where they say, okay, here's your labels, root port, designated port, blocking port, whatever, and you have to go and drag and drop these labels to the correct places in the diagram so that you can prove to Cisco that you understand how Spanning Tree does what it does. Good. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.